Oh man, guys, it's getting dark in here. It's getting real dark. We're approaching the darkest part of the night, and the clock is about to strike midnight. Charles at the whiteboard. This brings back such good memories. I think there's probably not that many people in Cardano. Maybe there's like people who trade the asset that aren't really in Cardano, and it's just some numbers, on an exchange somewhere. But for people who are really in Cardano, it's probably hard to find someone who's actually in Cardano who hasn't watched Charles at a whiteboard before. Whether it's in person or on video, you've probably seen Charles at the whiteboard. People have skills in life, and this man, this is a skill he has. He can jump on a whiteboard, start writing words and lines and circling things, talking about crypto. And it's inspired a lot of people to believe in a vision, not just about a financial asset, not just about something that could affect their own personal economic situation, but about the possibility of a better way to order the economic opportunities for maybe the whole globe. You could say that's overly optimistic, maybe even naive, but we in Cardano seem to have, to some extent, I think a lot of us at least, we'll say it like that, because certainly there's people in there who don't care about this thing. There are people in Cardano and in crypto generally who don't care at all about the things I'm about to talk about. But I think to some extent there's there's this thing in the community we've all rallied around, this possible future, this vision of the future where maybe there's a better way to order economic life for human beings. And this particular whiteboard talk, I think represents a pretty big paradigm shift for Cardano for a long, long time. And I'm not going to say this is the first time we've had a big shift in Cardano, because we certainly have had others, but I think this is a pretty big one. For a long time, we talked about this, sort of ideological, philosophical framework of the island, the ocean, and the pond. And the idea was that crypto had only reached out to a very small percentage of the people who could be adopters and users of crypto. And that was maybe like the pond. Maybe the pond was the people who are already in crypto. But the idea was that Cardano could be an island that would be bigger than the pond, and the island would touch and reach out into the ocean. The ocean represented all of the mainstream humans who were not yet in crypto, mainstream developers who didn't have anything to do with crypto, mainstream retail users who didn't have anything to do with crypto. We wanted to be bigger than just this very small niche crypto thing. And we've talked about the island, the ocean, and the pond for a long, long time. And what hasn't happened is that crypto has not blown up and taken over the entire world. That has not happened. And in fact, Cardano, while I think all of us in Cardano would agree that Cardano has some very great technology and some great ideas and a great community and great builders and developers, we wouldn't mind being quite a bit bigger. This new paradigm, this whole ethos around midnight, is a brand new framework to think about adoption. Maybe it's not even a brand new framework to think about adoption, but it's a brand new direction we're going in to accomplish adoption. So, this has been addressed in parts of both Charles's opening keynote to the Cardano Summit 2023 and in his closing keynote. And there were a lot of other great presentations during the Cardano Summit, and I'm sure we'll talk about a bunch of them at various points on this channel. But today we're just going to focus in on the important points about midnight. And we don't know everything yet. There's going to be a lot more details, I think, about midnight coming out. But we did learn a lot about midnight over the course of these two presentations at the Cardano Summit. So it's obvious that interoperability is the new game plan to draw in new users, to create new adoption in Cardano. So we already knew that Cardano seemed to be moving back toward something we talked about a long time ago. At the very start of this channel, we talked about the CCL and the CSL. This was the Cardano settlement layer and the Cardano computation layer. This was the idea that you'd have like sort of a base layer where all of the transactions and the computation kind of settle to be recorded on the ledger sort of permanently. And then you'd also have the Cardano computation layer where you could have all this computation and transactions and all of the actual action happening. And then it's committed to the Cardano settlement layer, everything's settling on this base layer. It looks like we're moving back toward that structure in a big way, but there are some changes. There's some new terminology, some new nomenclature. It's still that same idea, but they've added a lot of things to it. And it looks like this is going to be a very, very big theme in Cardano going forward. As always, do I know if this is going to work? No idea. Does anybody know? Probably not. But it seems like this is going to be a very big topic of conversation. There's going to be a lot going on in this direction over the next couple of years, I think. So it's worth going over everything we know about this at this point right now. So this is going to go deep in the direction of the layerverse that I've done several videos on, where we have sort of one Cardano base layer, just like the Cardano settlement layer concept, and then a universe of other layers, like those Cardano CCLs, the Cardano computation layers, a universe of other layers that make arbitrary sacrifices and gains in terms of the legs of the blockchain trilemma. So, as always, you've got decentralization, security, and scaling. And every blockchain out there pretty much has to make a decision where they want to be on all three of those. Of course, you would maximize all of them if you could, but it turns out you have to make trade offs. So, you can have this Cardano base layer and then a layerverse, a universe of layers where you can make other decisions as to which of those legs of the trilemma you want to maximize. So, do you want to sacrifice decentralization for speed? Go ahead. You can create your own layer to do that. Now, with Cardano's new framework, this new direction we're moving in, this is going to be a direction involving things called side chains that we're now going to call partner chains instead. With this particular one that's going to be getting a lot of attention soon. And like I said, I think we're still going in the direction of a layerverse, many, many different layers, probably many L2s, many side chains. Today, we're going to be talking mainly about side chains, which we're now calling partner chains. The first of which, we're going to have a lot of these, but the first of which is going to be Midnight. And with the Midnight, IOG is creating a layer as a side chain that we're now calling a partner chain to prioritize privacy, which we're now calling data protection. Why are we calling it data protection and not privacy? Because we don't want to arouse the wrath of government actors who hate privacy coins. One of the things that became clear, very clear over the last, not just the last couple years during Operation Choke Point 2.0, but over the last half decade, very clear that certain regulators and politicians, policymakers, they kind of hate privacy coins. One of the problems, one of the things we've been combating so much in crypto lately has been this idea that crypto is used by bad guys, terrorists, narco traffickers, human name your favorite flavor of bad guy. And, the accusations have been levied that they are using crypto to finance their operations, which of course anyone in crypto knows that's a terrible idea. And it's turned out to be a terrible idea because they use crypto. And the problem is you've got a completely transparent ledger there. So everyone can see in normal crypto networks, everyone can see the movement of all of the assets on the ledger. So it's terrible if you are a bad guy trying to hide illicit transactions. That's why we know in crypto that this is not actually a crypto problem. And of course, there's much more money laundering and illicit transactions going on with fiat cash. But that doesn't stop the policymakers who hate crypto from leveling these accusations at crypto. So, of course, to avoid that, we don't call this currently. We've currently relabeled this from a privacy coin to a data protection system, a data protection network, a data protection coin, this kind of blockchain, a data protection blockchain. So there's a lot of other things going on here. They are also going with Midnight, they're also going to prioritize interoperability via trustless bridges. If you listen to this channel, you know that I'm pretty leery of bridges. We see a lot of failures with bridges. So when they say trustless bridge, I like the sounds of that. Obviously the devil's in the details here, and how you execute a trustless bridge is probably going to be the magic part. Hopefully they can do that and we get some very highly secure trustless bridges. But like I said, there's a lot going on with Midnight. Interestingly, they're going to use Babel fees to allow Cardano SPOs to run the Midnight network and still be able to get paid in ADA. They'll use Minotaur, and we've talked about Babel fees and Minotaur and a lot of the other things we're going to talk about today in previous episodes. So feel free to go back and reference those if you have no idea what Minotaur or Babel fees are. But they'll use Minotaur to allow for any particular side chain, including Midnight in this case, to use any particular resource for the consensus model, including even multiple resources. With Midnight, they'll use zero knowledge proofs to add privacy, which we're now calling data protection, on top of this multi-resource consensus interoperable partner chain. So you can see there's a lot of new nomenclature here, and some of this I'm sure is put in place because it has some regulatory benefits. But there's a lot going on with Midnight. We've got the zero knowledge piece, which creates the privacy. We've got the multi-resource consensus piece. That's the Minotaur piece. We've also got the interoperability. We've also got the Babel fees, which go toward interoperability. The base layer or Cardano settlement layer will now be called the Cardano asset and settlement layer, or the CASL, and the computation layer, or CCLs, will now be called the Cardano service layers, because it's not really just about computation. There's a lot of different use cases, a lot of different services that can be provided to users. And I think computation is a little bit limiting. We're now calling those Cardano service layers. This whole new system will be called the Cardano Partner Chain Framework, the CPF. So we could have Cardano service layers like Midnight, the Midnight partner chain, Midnight side chain, whatever you want to call it, is a Cardano service layer. We could have other Cardano service layers for Ethereum and Bitcoin and Midnight. We could choose, for Midnight to service Ethereum and Bitcoin with tokens that pay not only the Cardano SPOs validating transactions on those Cardano service layers, but also Ethereum stake pool operators, Bitcoin miners. So you can see where this is going. Because we have multi-resource consensus now, that's the Minotaur piece, because we can have something like proof of work and proof of stake coexisting, because we can have both, either whatever we want under Minotaur. You could involve Ethereum stake pool operators and Bitcoin miners. And this is something that Charles seemed to be very excited about during his opening keynote address at the Cardano Summit. The reason you might want to include validators from other networks is because if they're getting paid, if those validators are getting paid to validate transactions, which is, let's face it, the only reason validators do validate transactions, they're going to want to promote the network. They're going to be incentivized to, do anything they can to make the network successful. Instead of maximalism being the order of the day in crypto, where the Bitcoin people hate everybody, the Ethereum people hate the Cardano people, the Solana people hate who knows who. Instead of maximalism causing this tribalism we see in crypto, instead, if any other chain, if the validators from any other chain could be included to help validate transactions on these partner chains, then all of a sudden they have an economic incentive to be pro Cardano, at least be pro that partner chain, which will be a part of Cardano. This is a brand new way. And Charles seems very hopeful that this is like really a cure, a complete cure to the maximalism and tribalism, which really, I mean, I think anybody who's been in crypto for any amount of time sees that it's been a pretty big impediment to the growth of crypto generally. We could all be friends for once. The Bitcoin miners, if they're mining transactions, if they're mining blocks which hold transactions on a Cardano partner chain, they're probably going to be a lot more pro Cardano. Same with Ethereum stake pools. If they're validating transactions on a Cardano partner chain, they're probably not going to be quite so acidic toward Cardano. So this is kind of I, it's kind of a good rationale for the name Midnight. It's almost like the darkness, us, Cardano being the darkness. It's almost like the darkness swallowing up, swallowing up the daytime, sort of against the will of the sun. The light is being swallowed by the darkness of midnight, which I kind of like the sounds of. Then there are also plans to have a dual token model in Midnight. You could have a token on the side chain, so on the partner chain, on the Cardano service layer, whatever you'd like to call it. We're gonna have to consolidate this nomenclature at some point here, but it sounds like they're gonna call them partner chains. But you can think of it as a regular side chain. You could have a token on the side chain with one predictable monetary policy. Why would you want a predictable monetary policy on the side chain? Because we want businesses to use the sidechain. And what businesses don't like is if they have to wake up every morning and figure out if their operational costs have 3x or 5x overnight because there was some run up in the price of the crypto asset that is used to pay for the transactions on the blockchain. They don't like that. It makes it impossible to run their business if they can't predict how much transactions are going to cost. Like, would you ever go run your transactions in this market ecosystem thing where the price is completely unpredictable? No, you would not. That's businesses don't like that. So what's being proposed here is that the sidechain transactions be paid for with assets that have a monetary policy that makes the price very predictable and stable. So the cool thing with this dual token system that's being proposed for Midnight is that you can have that on the side chain. And Charles, when he's describing this, actually alluded to a nameless telecom company that could benefit from this. And obviously he's talking about WorldCom. Obviously WorldCom, if they, their sort of use case is as a legitimate telecom company, which we've talked about many times on the channel. And it's a lot easier to run that business, I would assume, if you can predict the price of the operational cost of running your business on the blockchain. It makes it a lot easier to do it. So we have the side chain with an asset that has a monetary policy that creates predictable and stable pricing. But then you can also have, it's a dual coin system. So you can also have a Cardano native asset running on the Cardano base layer that controls governance and that could have a deflationary monetary policy, just like Bitcoin. So you could have the normal crypto craziness where all the assets occasionally go crazy on this, often 4-year cycle where we see these parabolic run ups and then these collapses. You could still have all the crypto craziness, all the wild, chaotic fun of crypto on the Cardano base layer with an asset that has a totally different monetary policy that lets it do the crazy roller coaster stuff. And then you could have this other asset on the actual partner chain, on the side chain that has a very stable and predictable price. This is the best of both worlds. This sounds pretty fantastic. Like I said, with all these things, the devil is in the details, and nobody's saying they know for a fact that Cardano is going to execute this perfectly. We just don't know, but it sounds pretty good. So this is an overall plan to take all of the brilliance of the crypto ecosystem and make it our own. Like I said, this is still going very much in the direction of the layerverse. So we've got Midnight. We've talked about Midnight, it being a data protection chain, it being an interoperable chain, it having these privacy features. It has a lot of different features, but we're still going in the direction of this layerverse. So we can have all kinds of different partner chains. We can have a partner chain that basically is just there to create interoperability with whatever other blockchain you want. And you can bring the validators from that block because of Minotaur. We can bring the validators from that blockchain in so that they buy in. They have an economic incentive to not say bad things about us on X, on Twitter. I mean, we can, if they're getting paid for transactions that happen on that partner chain because they're allowed to be validators, because we have Minotaur and the Cardano SPOs can validate and the validators from these other chains can validate, they're going to have an economic incentive not to be tribalistic, not to hate Cardano because they're making money off this partner chain. So will we be able to execute on this? I don't know, but it sounds pretty good. Charles basically says this is the culmination of years of work in the lab and the real world. And it kind of makes sense. They found like one thread to tie together Minotaur and zero knowledge proofs and Babel fees and all these different pieces of research that IOG has kind of sponsored over the years. And then they add on top of that all the interoperability. Minotaur, of course, is allowing for the interoperability even between different consensus models in chains. And all of a sudden, we can use all this research that Cardano has done, and we can steal the best technology from all over the crypto ecosystem, which is always a good idea. If you can take the most brilliant technology from all over, you're usually going to come out with a better result than if you just try to reinvent the wheel on your own. Of course, we also need the innovation, and I think that's what this partner chain concept is. The partner chain itself and all these different pieces leading into it, the Babel fees and Minotaur and all of these other things, that's the innovation. But then there's a lot of good technology already out there in crypto, and we're going to steal all of it by making it a part of a partner chain that corresponds to interoperability with whatever ecosystem has that technology. And that other ecosystem is going to be in favor of it because it'll give the developers new places to deploy things they build. It'll give the validators new places to validate, and it'll give the users in that ecosystem a new place to use the platforms and technology from their ecosystem. So the CEO of Midnight is Aaron Barak, and Aaron Barak was came on the stage after Charles. He emphasized that Midnight wants to be a partner chain to Cardano, and in a partnership, both sides get something. So it's a partnership. Midnight is not just a subservient chain to Cardano. Midnight's going to get something here, and Cardano is going to get something here. He says that Midnight wants to leverage Cardano to get to market and decentralization faster. And in exchange, Cardano stake pool operators and DeFi will get new revenue streams and incentives. Devs in Cardano will get new use cases and a fund to create interoperability between networks, and ADA holders will get a midnight token drop. So I know that's the part that a lot of people will get excited for. I believe he said that on stage. He said ADA holders will get a midnight token drop. Do I know anything about the tokenomics of that token drop? Not yet. I think all those details are going to come out very soon, because Aaron Barak also said over 1,000 engineering teams have already signed up for the Midnight DevNet, and the DevNet will begin on November 13th. They'll begin onboarding teams onto the DevNet. So this is all sort of beginning to happen right now. It's really interesting. I don't think probably no one imagined that all these different strands of IOG research would culminate in a single product, if you want to think of Midnight as a product. But that's what's happening right now. And Midnight is just one of what Charles hopes will be thousands of Cardano service layers eventually. But this is the first one. And it's a pretty interesting combination of a bunch of different a bunch of different things that could benefit Cardano and also benefit interoperability across the entire crypto ecosystem. Charles characterizes this also through the lens of a Hegelian dialectic, where you have TradFi all this time basically saying, hey, we don't know why crypto has so much trouble with regulation. Regulation is actually easy. You just centralize everything. And of course, all of us crypto people over here are like, no, the better way is to just keep it decentralized and just sort of have trillions of dollars of assets floating around in this Wild West market with no regulation, no compliance, at least. And Charles sees Midnight with its privacy features sort of as the synthesis of those two positions. So when I, when I hear that, and also as I've heard sort of different sentiments expressed around Midnight. From the very first time we heard about Midnight, I've thought a big piece of Midnight, a big part of the reason for being for Midnight is to satisfy regulation. But satisfy it in what way? That's the next question. These are some of the details we don't have. But the data protection piece is going to be pretty interesting there. So you have to ask yourself, how much does it change regulation if you don't know? If you are doing whatever you're doing, whatever role you're filling on a blockchain, if you don't know anything, if there is no way for you to know anything, how does that affect your compliance with regulation? Well, certainly if you can't know certain pieces of information like zero knowledge proofs would allow for you to not know certain things and only know some other things, then regulation becomes a lot simpler because regulators can force you to report things that you know, but it's very difficult for them to force you to report things you don't know. That's obviously a big piece of what's going on with Midnight. And you hear with Midnight, we always hear regulation mentioned, but it's going to be interesting how this actually plays out. I think someone not knowing something plays a very big role in how much regulators can make them report things and comply with certain types of regulations. I think that's going to be something we're going to see a lot of going forward. The other thing that wasn't mentioned much actually in the Cardano Summit, but something we've talked about a lot in the past, just in Cardano generally and also directly on this channel, is the fact that Midnight's language is TypeScript. So you could argue, and probably not be wrong, that one of the biggest challenges to adoption in Cardano, and we've talked about this a million times. I think everyone in Cardano understands this, and they've talked about it a million times. Of course, one of the biggest hurdles to adoption in Cardano by developers has been that we chose one of the hardest languages, one of the most intimidating languages we could have chosen. Sure, there are harder ones. You could come up with a whole list of languages that you might regard as harder than Haskell, but we definitely went super far out on the curve where there are so few developers who currently know the language and so few who are willing to learn the language. We basically put the video game on super difficult death march mode for ourselves, and yet we're still here with one of the craziest, most lively communities ever. And that's even being on super difficult death march mode all this time. Now, all of a sudden, Cardano is going to go on easy mode because TypeScript, compared to Haskell, easy to acquire developers. There are a whole lot of JavaScript developers out there who will look at this and say, oh, TypeScript, I can do that. I can do that. Haskell, I'm not going to do that. They could also do Haskell, but they're not going to. They're not going to learn Haskell to create things, to build things on Cardano. But a JavaScript developer, when they see that they can build things in TypeScript, it's going to be a lot more appealing. All of a sudden, we're on easy mode. And on top, that's kind of the ocean. That's still the ocean. We're attacking the ocean there. As far as the pond goes, though, we've got interoperability, which is going to draw from the pond. So all of a sudden now, Cardano has gone from just this ocean strategy in one fell swoop to a much better ocean strategy with TypeScript, and we're also addressing the pond almost for the first time ever with the interoperability in Midnight. Plus, we've also got this other thread in there about being regulation resistant, possibly. Like I said, the, the devil's in the details here, but also going to be a little bit more regulation resistant if we've got certain types of data protection. And obviously, that can play out a lot of different ways. Courts will probably be dealing with data protection in blockchains for a long, long time to come. And we don't know how it's going to turn out. But in one fell swoop with Midnight, all of a sudden, we've got a whole bunch of brand new things going on in Cardano. This is sort of a brand new night, not a brand new day in this case, but a brand new night for Cardano. And like I said, nobody knows how this is going to turn out. But so far, just based on the way things are looking, I'm saying long live the darkness. I hope you had a great weekend. I hope you're getting ready for a great week. And I'll talk to you soon.